Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. We are back to the chessboard again, and we're still talking about the 45th FIDE Chess Olympiad, Budapest 2024, that just ended a couple of days ago. Even though the tournament is ended, there were so many interesting games that needs to be checked out. And for today, I'm actually going to be talking about the blunders in Budapest. So we're going to get right into it. And the game I'm featuring today is the game between Panama and USA, United States of America, who are the top seed of the Olympiad. So this was a game played between two players, which is Levon Aronian. Actually, Levon Aronian was on the black side. Mendez versus Levon Aronian. It's very interesting because very early in the middle game, Aronian made a grave mistake that was losing immediately. So let us see how this game went. This was Panama versus United States of America, the very first round, the very first game of the 45th Chess Olympiad. So let's go. E4, C5, knight to F3, knight to C6. We have the Sicilian defense. We have the classical Sicilian defense. Why do I say the classical? I said in my earlier videos, whenever the knight comes to C6, that's actually the classical duration of a Sicilian defense. Now, the classical can now lead to so many other kinds of Sicilian defenses. Could lead to the dragon, it could lead to the Sveshnikov, also known as the pelican. Let's see how this game went. Now, this is actually leading into the Rosolimo kind of position. So bishop to b5 was played, knight to f6, hitting the pawn on e4. White defends the pawn with the knight on c3. Now, note in this game, there is not an early d4. In most open Sicilian, there is always an early d4. Well, this is not really an open Sicilian, at least for now, because the d4 pawn hasn't been moved yet. So let's keep going. G6 is played. Like I said earlier, this variation can lead to so many things. The bishop b5, with the bishop b5, we could say it's the Rosolimo. Now, with the g6, we're going into the field of the dragon, but not exactly the dragon, because like I said, d4 has not been played, so it's really not an open position. So we're still going to leave it at the Rosolimo range. So g6 is played, e5. Immediately, white strikes in the center by trying to dislodge the knight on f6, which is a very important defending tool for the black pieces, not just in the Sicilian defense, but most defenses. The knight on f6 is always a very important tool for the black king because the knight always defends the h7 square. So knight h5 is played, bishop takes c6, d takes c6. Every time a capture is made in the chess game, always have to ask yourself, what are you getting for the capture? So the white piece is giving up his bishop for the pawn, and what does he have for that? He has a double pawn. So in positions like this, white is going to look to play some kind of close position where his light square bishop is not really going to be missed much. I'm going to use that word much. So let's keep going. White castles. Black plays knight to g7. Strange move. Strange move. What's the idea? Apparently, probably the knight is planning to come to e6, to come and settle on d4, and bishop is going to come to g7, is going to castle, and at some point in time, he's going to look to open up the position. And why is he trying to open up the position? Because when you have the bishops, you want to always open up the position. And when you have the knight, you want the position closed. So knight g7 is played, d3, and white is sticking to the the plan he should adopt in this position. And what do I mean by the plan? When you have the knight, you want to keep the position closed. If you get the position open up, you can really get into trouble very fast. So d3 is played, h6. And I have to say this, after the move d3, this position was actually played before by Krish, I think it's Krishnan versus Stremavikosios. I think that's a Greek name. So this position has been played before once. So h6 is played, knight to d, knight to e4, keeping an eye on the f6 square and the d6 square. So, looking at this position, we could say white has a good opening and having a good transition into the middle game. He has a good knight on f3, knight on e4. He can bring his rook to e1. At some point in time, he can play b3 to bring his bishop to b2 to try and neutralize the effect of the bishop that's going to come to g7 in some cases. And also, the bishop to b2 also helps a lot of the d4 square. So let's keep going. b6. Now, b6 has to be played. Looking at the bishop on c8, you can either bring the bishop here, but note this very well. If the bishop gets to g4, be ready to exchange it up because after the h3 move, you cannot go to h5, you're going to get trapped. So you either have to go back to e6, which will be a bad move, stopping the knight from coming to the game, or you have to go to d7, blocking the queen, or back to c8. That means you're just losing the move. We don't want to do that. So b6 is played. After b6, rook to e1, you always want to centralize your pieces. That means put your pieces, either your bishops, your knights, your rooks, on the two central files. That's the d and the e files. So knight to f5 is played, not actually knight to e6, but knight to f5. Of course, knight f5 clears um the the g7 square for the bishop, so that the bishop can get in the game. And of course, knight d5 also eyes the very important d4 square. White plays c3, telling black, you know what, I don't want you to get into that square, at least not for now. So I'm going to have to try to stop you by moving my pawn to c3. Now, black plays g5. We have to really question the move and the plan. What's the point of g5? Now, let us break down this position. The king is in the center. The bishops are undeveloped. You have only one active piece, which is the knight on f5. Your rooks are out of the game. Here comes the move g5. Sometimes I wonder, but this is all chess. White has his knight developed. He has a rook on e1 looking good. Bishop on c1 is looking bad either because at least he has some targets. So white really has a very good position here. So the question is, what is the GM's plan? What's the point of the G? What's the point of the G5? What exactly is the GM trying to do? In a game of chess, you can't start active operations when you're behind in development. It's going to backfire at some point. So after the move G5, white plays queen to a4, hitting on the pawn on c6. So immediate queen takes pawn is a possible move check. With the bishop move, the queen can pretty much come to b7 or d5 to slide back to b3. That's a go kill and come back move. Just one pawn and then just right back home. Now here goes the first blunder of the game. Black plays queen to c7, losing immediately. Losing immediately. And why is this losing immediately? Let me just show us some things about this position. Now, this is an X-ray attack. Anytime there's an X-ray attack, you have to consider it as if it's a direct attack. So being in the line of attack of the rook is a big deal. That's one. Now, the reason why there's no check is because we have a knight on e4, we have a pawn on e5, and then we have a pawn on e7. So at some point in time, if any of these pieces or pawns can move out of the way, this king is going to be very uncomfortable. So after the move queen to c7, white plays g4. Very strong move. Now, the idea of the g4 move is to weaken the control of the d6 square. What am I talking about? Moving this pawn back, we have the pawn on e7, we have the queen on c7, and we have the knight on f5, keeping an eye on the f5 square, on the d6 square. So, for example, if knight d6 check, um, we still cannot capture here. We still cannot capture because pawn takes. There's pressure. No, actually, we can capture. Knight check, knight d6 check, knight takes, pawn takes, queen takes. Just a pawn up. But I mean, white might have some kind of competition for it. But instead, g4 was a very strong move. After the move g4, black is in a lot of trouble. At this point in time, I don't think Aronian will like his position. And if I can vividly remember, the last Olympiad played in Chennai, Aronian got into some problems against the international master from Angola. Although he wasn't so lucky in that game, he was able to escape with a draw, even though the final position was losing for Levon. Levon is such a great guy. I don't know what Levon was thinking about when he made this move, but stuff's happened in the game of chess. G4 is played, queen goes to b7. Now think about this. Black is about to be a piece down for absolutely nothing, and somehow Black was able to win this game. Well, don't let's be so judgmental when it comes to Black losing this game. If you're a 2100 playing against a 2700, I can tell you there's a lot of intimidation going on there. Even when you're winning, you're not really sure, like, wow, really, am I winning? It's going to take you a while to get used to getting in such position to be able to actually win such games. So I'm not going to take anything away from the white pieces. So captures on g5, captures on f5, bishop captures back. d4 makes a lot of sense. What's the point of d4? Of course, your upper piece, and apart from the fact your upper piece, you're ahead in development. What's the next thing you want to do? You want to open up the position. D4 makes a lot of sense because the more open the position is, the better the position for the white pieces. Meanwhile, bishop is still undeveloped. Rook is out of the game. Rook is out of the game. Queen is not doing much. This is the only active piece on the board, the bishop on f5. So let's keep going. Bishop to g4, hitting the knight on f3, knight to knight f d2, takes on d4, knight to b3. I don't know why they didn't take back, but castles, take back with a pawn, king to b8. Now, one thing white has to be worried about is this long diagonal. You have to worry about that. I just said earlier, whenever there's an x-ray attack, always think about it. Because if we take this knight and the pawn off the board, the king can't step on any of these light squares. Why? Because of the queen on b7. And if the queen can have the support of a pawn or a bishop or a knight, there's going to be checkmate on g2. So as somebody playing these white pieces, you have to have this at the back of your mind. There's a possible mate on g2 if the queen can be supported on the g2 square. Just have that at the back of your mind. Whatever information you do with it, that's on you. So bishop to d2, trying to develop all the mate pieces. Bishop goes to d7. Another very bad move by Aronian. Um, this is the first round. Why is Levon playing such bad moves? I really have no clue. One thing about chess is it's not just about how good you are. It's not about how much theory you have, but you also have to be in a straight and a strong and a focused mindset to be able to really get results when you're playing. Bishop d7, another very bad move. Queen to a3, I really don't like that move. Personally, I would have tried to find a way to come back to the king's side, maybe queen c4 and queen just comes back, maybe e2. I would have tried to do something like that. And another very strong move here that I like is knight bc5. The idea is if pawn captures, pawn knight captures back, black is going to have to worry about this switch. Queen king, this cannot be good. And the bishop can always go to e3, putting pressure on that part of the board. So let's keep going. Queen to a3. Well, I'm not going to blame what do you call. I'm not going to blame white again. Sometimes when you have such an advantage against such a strong player, it's like pinch me. Am I really the one having this position or not? So these things happen, and the only way you can actually get to win such a game is when you put yourself in that situation over and over and over again. Then that doesn't become a new thing to you. It becomes a norm. So bishop to f5 is played, hitting down the knight on e4. Rook to c1. That's not a bad move. d6, e6, uncovering the attack on the queen. Although the square e3 is kind of weak right now. So he plays queen to a4, a good move. Actually, I would have knight d6 was a possible move. I mean, I wouldn't. Why not knight d6? Knight d6 would be a good move, and then find a way to move this knight away so the queen can keep an eye on your queen side, your king side, and the queen king side and the queen side at the same time. So queen c4 was played. Rook to. I mean, it's interesting how Aronian just kept playing this game as if nothing happened. You're whole piece down, GM, but he just kept playing as if we've been here before, and I'm not really surprised. So rook to c3. Um, Having a doubled rook on the c file is not a bad idea. But the thing is, we have to remember this. In a game of chess, you always have to make sure you use the advantage you have. If you're up a piece, try to find out how you can use that piece. Put that piece to use. Right now, the extra piece here is not really telling because white's not telling because even though white is still much better, we have to find a way to get the pieces in the game. And there's a saying in chess, whenever you're up, try to exchange pieces. The more pieces you exchange, the more pronounced your advantage is. Because then that one piece your opponent is down with is going to have to tell at some point in time. So king to c, king to a8, knight to g3, attacking the knight and the bishop on f5. Bishop h3. Now, I said, I mentioned something about the g2 square earlier. Now, if this queen can get to g2, that's checkmate. At this point, you gotta have to forget about all the other pieces on the board. If the queen gets to g2, that is checkmate. So how does white deal with this problem? It plays knight to f1. Now, this is actually where white started having black started having some pull because that's actually a bad move by white. Now, a better move would have been to move the knight to h5. Knight to h5 would have been a good move. So what happens after the pawn push? I think after the pawn push, we can simply snap this rook off the board. So I'm sorry, the bishop. What am I talking about? We can just simply snap the bishop off the board. So knight f1 was played. Now, what's the difference? Because now after the move, now what's the difference between knight f1 and knight h5? After knight f1, after knight f1, this pawn move can be played, protecting the bishop, right? But if knight h5, if pawn push knight doubles back to f4, now this bishop is gone. This bishop is gone, rook comes to g3, and white is just winning. So, but instead the move knight f1 was played. Knight f1 was played. B5, knight, knight to a5. This is where white said, you know what, I'm just going to give you back your all the advantage. Let's just go back to being even. After this move, the position turned immediately to equality. So even though white is up a piece, it doesn't really have any kind of advantage. Takes the queen back, takes the bishop, takes back, king takes. All of a sudden, we have the position is even, almost even, because now we have the two rooks and the minor pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pawns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pawns. Even black is up a pawn. So already this is not going to look good for white. Having this equal number of pieces. I mean, positionally wise, yes, it's even. But when you're looking at the players playing, I don't think Aronian is going to have an even position against the 2100 and mess it up again, especially in the same game. So rook to c4, eating pawn on c4, bishop e7, connecting the rooks, finishing the development. Rook captures the pawn. Rook goes to c d8, defends the pawn on d4, c5, very good move. Why is it a good move? It's very important for you to open up opportunities for your rook. If these rooks can come down to the 7th file, there's going to be some problem. So captures on c5, captures back, and rook to e4. At this point, it's still even, but like I said earlier, playing an even position against a very strong GM can be very intimidating. How you're going to get out of it, I have no clue. Another thing is not so easy when you lose your advantage. When you lose your advantage, you pretty much lose your line of thought. Everything doesn't just work right any longer. It's not so easy. So bishop to b6 captures back. Rook to e2, trying to defend the e2nd rank. And let's see how this game ended. Rook check, king goes to g2, h5, h5. This pawn's moving towards this king might be some problems for the white king. h5, f4. What's the point of F4? Like I said, if it captures, then I can capture back, have some pressure on the pawn on F7. But they said, no, 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 I can't let you do that. I'm just going to push my pawn. I'm going to let the pawn stay here. The presence of the pawn is going to cause some problems for you. But I still think this position is even. So I don't think there's anything black can do. I mean, chess-wise. So king to g3. If I can get a blockade on h4, that would be a good move. And maybe can take this pawn at some point in time, although not right away, because I don't want to get into any kind of checkmating pattern. So rook to g8, rook to e3, rook attacks the pawn on f4, still nothing. Now that's a blunder. That's a blunder, and you can't blunder against these big boys. They will take you out very quickly. So check, king has to move. Now the rook moves back. Now I'm wondering here, what's wrong? Rook takes check. Rook takes, king takes, and rook d8. Now already you have a pass pawn here, so you don't need the rook or a king to see this pawn off. So what you can do is if you find a way to get this king and rook away from these two guys, you're winning the game. How could you do that? Rook to d8. What's the threat? Rook check. Now if the king moves here, right? If the king moves here, make it longer. Rook to c8, still threatening to move here. So the king moving here, and now we can actually bring the rook to start putting pressure on there. And these 2 pawns are going to be very decisive. These 2 pawns are going to be very decisive. So Aronian didn't do that. Instead, he moved this king g2, rook to d1, not the best move. Another blunder by white. You really can't, like I said, you really can't blame white. Uh, This pawn check is very strong. After king move, this rook check is very strong. You don't have the you don't have the g2 square because we have a pawn on h3. And you coming out here, this check is also very strong. So h3 check was played, king goes to g3, rook check was played, king goes to h4, pawn push. The idea of the pawn push is to make sure this king doesn't have this file. For example, if pawn takes, if pawn takes, what's going to happen? Rook 1 takes g3. This king is limiting it. That's the bottom line. So rook takes, 1 takes g3, right? After rook takes 1 takes g3, Panama Mendez gladly resigned because he cannot stop checkmating foremost. So this is the first game I'm going to go over, talking about the blunders in Budapest. And I like this is the first round. I wouldn't say it's fatigue. And like I said earlier, to play a very good game, you have to be sound all around, physically, emotionally, theoretically, everything has to be in place. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm a GM, I'm 2700, I'm just going to go and play," without your mind being in the game. So that being said, we are going to stop here and we are going to bring to you more games that was played at the for the fifth Chess Olympiad that was played by whoever it is, could be grandmasters and all that, and how the games ended. See you soon. Bye for now.